He thought I'd let his toxic sister take credit for my heritage pastry, unaware she needed a secure digital code that only the real baker possessed. The morning of the high-stakes Mitchell family Thanksgiving bake-off arrived, freezing and suffocatingly tense. I woke up at 4 in the morning, loaded my vehicle with custom temperature-insulated pastry transport boxes, and arrived at the Community Country Club Pavilion exactly 3 hours before the judging panel was scheduled to convene. My fingers were raw from crimping the delicate, multi-layered structural edges of my signature heritage pastries, and my lower back ached from standing over the cooling racks to ensure the glaze set with a flawless, mirror-like sheen. I spent hours tuning the humidity levels inside the holding cases, wiping down the presentation platters, and aligning my handwritten botanical ingredient cards. By 11 in the morning, the exhibition table looked breathtaking. The absolute pinnacle of artisanal baking was laid out with the clinical precision of a professional pastry showcase. At noon, 1 hour before the extended family, local pastry critics, and regional community judges were scheduled to arrive. My fiancé, Garrett, walked into the pavilion. His polished shoes clicked aggressively against the concrete floor. Behind him walked his younger sister, Sloane, wearing a pristine, expensive designer outfit that cost more than my monthly earnings. She was holding an iced coffee, her eyes scanning my completed work with a cold, lazy entitlement. Garrett stopped dead in the center of the exhibition space, looking at the glowing glass display and the intricate, multi-tiered structural lattice on my main pastry entry. A slow, calculating smile spread across his face. He didn't look at me, even though I was standing right there in my flour-dusted apron with a master baking timer clipped to my waist. He turned directly to Sloane, his voice rising into that breathless, theatrical cadence he reserved exclusively for his family's golden child. "Oh, sweetie, look at this. This is going to look absolutely magnificent when the Country Club Committee sees the level of artistry. This entry is exactly the kind of high-profile community praise that will secure your local artisanal sponsorship before you launch your lifestyle blog next month." My stomach turned over completely. I stepped down from the presentation platform, my baking timer rattling against my belt. "Garrett, what are you talking about?" Sloane didn't touch a single piece of dough. "I spent 48 hours laminating this pastry structure from scratch using my late grandmother's heritage recipes. My name is on the official submission form as the primary baker." Garrett's smile vanished instantly, his expression hardening into the cold, clinical contempt he used whenever I dared to establish boundaries against his toxic family. He stepped into my personal space, his voice dropping into a harsh, venomous whisper so Sloane's mood wouldn't be ruined. "Don't start your typical selfish drama today of all days," he hissed, his eyes glaring toward the pavilion entrance. "You are marrying into this family, Gwen. It is your duty to support your sister's ascent. You already have a stable professional reputation, while Sloane needs this pristine launch pad to look accomplished to the local community board. The entry tags are being updated. For today, you need to step away from the display and sit in the back corner near the kitchen doors. You don't quite fit the aesthetic of the main family press photos anyway." Sloane didn't say a word. She simply stood behind her brother, adjusted her designer sunglasses, and threw me a smug, triumphant little smile over her plastic cup. Garrett reached forward, unclipped my official, registered entry tags from the display rack, and smoothly slotted in a set of custom-printed cards bearing Sloane's name. "Go sit in the back room," Garrett ordered, turning his back to me. "The real guests are arriving." I walked out of the main exhibition space and into the small, dim, technical storage room behind the presentation stage to sit in the shadows. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open my water bottle. The sheer, suffocating injustice of the moment felt like a physical weight in my chest. For 2 years of our engagement, I had allowed them to take small things: my time, my energy, my compliance. But this was 48 hours of my soul, poured into a heritage baking project that carried the memory of the one person who had truly supported my culinary dreams. I sat in the dim light, looking through the glass viewing slit in the door, and felt the last remaining threads of my patience dissolve completely. I realized a critical truth about the dynamic between Garrett and his sister. Their entire system relied on my absolute technical efficiency to fund their illusions. They stole my work because they knew my work was flawless. They assumed that because I cared about the heritage of the craft, I would protect the presentation from public failure, even if it meant absorbing their behavior in silence. They believed I would sit quietly by the kitchen doors and watch Sloane claim my victory, but a cold, calculating calm took over. I sat down behind the technical counter and looked down at the main floor. The heavy double doors had opened, and 50 prominent members of our local community, along with 3 regional culinary judges, were streaming into the pavilion. In the center of the front row sat the head judge, a notoriously strict master pastry chef from the state culinary board. Garrett was already moving through the crowd like a high society politician, loudly directing everyone's attention towards Sloane. I heard his voice echoing through the monitor speakers. Yes, our sweet Sloane poured her entire soul into this heritage bake. She worked through absolute exhaustion to perfect the structural lamination. I looked down at the digital submission portal on my tablet. Because this was an official regional competition tied to civic grants and certifications, the rules were strict and unalterable. To prevent plagiarism and commercial sourcing, every baker was required to submit an encrypted digital recipe code and production log sheet into the state database prior to the live tasting. Garrett had used his access as a pavilion coordinator to physically swap the cardboard tags on the table, but he was profoundly lazy. He hadn't touched the secure digital database, he hadn't updated the encryption portal, and he had completely refused to read the technical logbook I had left by the cooling rack. He genuinely believed that high-end baking was nothing more than putting a beautiful dish on a table, smiling for the cameras and reading generic, emotional platitudes off a printed script. They completely relied on my silence to shield them from their own total lack of preparation. They believed that even if they pushed me into the dark, I would still keep quiet to protect Garrett's status on the club board. My fingers relaxed as I watched the head judge walk up to the center table with a silver cutting knife and a master grading tablet. The lights in the main pavilion began to drop, signaling the start of the formal evaluation. Garrett took the introductory microphone, his face beaming under the spotlights. "Distinguished guests and judges," he announced, "please welcome the mastermind behind this incredible heritage display, my beautiful sister, Sloane." The room erupted into warm applause. Sloane stepped into the judging ring under the high-intensity spotlights, holding her iced coffee with a practiced, theatrical elegance. She adjusted her lapel microphone, took a deep breath, and prepared to take credit for my life's work. "Thank you so much, everyone," Sloane murmured, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. When I began this intense culinary journey, I asked myself, how do you capture the soul of tradition? It took endless nights of rolling dough, balancing temperatures, and sacrificing my own comfort. But I did it all to bring this masterpiece to life. She smiled arrogantly, her shoulders dropping as she realized how easy this was going to be. She didn't even look back at the technical display. She just glanced down at her iPad script and read the lines. "The secret to this pastry is pure, unadulterated passion," Sloane read smoothly. She led the judges toward the display table, completely confident that the rest of the afternoon would be an effortless ride to a standing ovation and the local artisanal sponsorship. But the state culinary board didn't rely on generic platitudes. They followed strict, unalterable guidelines to ensure absolute authenticity. The head judge stood up from the panel, his sharp eyes scanning the intricate, multi-layered pastry structure. "An incredible narrative, young lady," the judge announced into his microphone. "Before we execute the live tasting and finalize the scoring for the Heritage Cup, we must verify the encrypted recipe code on the state terminal to confirm the internal chemical balance and processing time match your description." Sloane froze. She looked at the judge, a faint, nervous smile cracking through her heavy makeup. "Oh, of course. The paperwork is all handled," she stammered, her eyes courting frantically toward Garrett. The judge tapped his terminal, linking it to the giant presentation screen behind the table. "Please enter your unique alphanumeric developer code and verify the fermentation timeline," the judge requested. Sloane completely panicked. She reached out and began hitting random keys on the judging tablet. Next, skip it. It's just a computer technicality. The system is glitched." She scrambled into the microphone, her voice cracking under the pressure. But the secure database simply locked down the scoring menu, refusing to proceed until the true licensed developer entered the correct security sequence. The judge's brow furrowed in deep disapproval. He stepped forward and picked up the silver cutting knife. "If you cannot verify the technical process, we will proceed with the internal structural slice to check the air pocket distribution. A traditional heritage lamination requires a precise manual vent technique, or the center collapses into raw dough the moment the outer crust is pierced." He drove the silver blade into the center of the pastry. Because Sloane had insisted on moving the display 3 separate times under the hot gallery, spotlights to get better lighting for her social media, photos, completely ignoring the strict climate commands in my logbook, the delicate internal structural integrity had completely failed. A loud, wet, terrifying squish echoed through the entire pavilion speakers as the gorgeous outer lattice caved inward, collapsing into a dense, unbaked wall of raw dough right in front of the judges. The entire auditorium went dead, suffocatingly silent. The applause stopped instantly. Garrett, who had been beaming in the front row, went completely rigid, his face draining of all color. Sloane stood at the podium, staring down at the ruined, raw mass of her own stolen fraud projected in high definition on the giant screen for the entire country club committee to see. The head judge dropped his knife onto the silver tray with a sharp, echoing clang. This is an absolute technical disaster. This pastry wasn't managed by a professional. It was completely ruined by negligence. Garrett, what is the meaning of this? You verified this submission under your family's credentials. The pavilion erupted into absolute chaos. Committee members were whispering frantically. Garrett scrambled out of his seat, his hands trembling as he ran toward the judging table, trying to use his physical body to block the live camera feed. Turn it off! Someone override the system. Gwen, fix the display! Garrett screamed toward the back storage doors, his eyes locking onto my position in the shadows. Sloane was completely frozen, tears of pure humiliation streaming down her face, her expensive designer outfit looking completely ridiculous next to a puddle of raw, ruined dough. I calmly stepped out from behind the heavy storage curtains, my sneakers squeaking softly in the sudden expectant silence of the room. I walked straight down the center aisle, passing Garrett, who was still frantically pleading with the technicians, and stepped into the judging ring. I took the master microphone right out of Sloane's shaking hand, logged into the terminal using my unique professional credentials, and unlocked the backup registry. The giant screen instantly cleared, shifting to a stunning, time-stamped digital log of my real production process. The precise temperature charts, the fermentation metrics, and the video files of me hand-shaping the backup entries inside the club's secondary holding kitchen over 48 long hours. I signaled the kitchen staff, who wheeled out my secondary, perfectly preserved backup pastry display, glowing with a flawless golden glaze. I delivered my original, deep structural presentation completely from memory, explaining the scientific context of the fermentation and honoring the true heritage of the craft. By the end of the presentation, the entire hall was in tears of genuine admiration. The committee and the judges stood up in a massive, thunderous standing ovation that lasted for minutes. The head judge walked forward and placed the gold heritage cup directly into my hand, along with the official regional sponsorship contract. When the house lights came up for the formal luncheon, the front row head table was completely empty. Sloane had fled to the parking lot, and Garrett had quietly packed his bags and left the building before the main courses were even served. No one asked about them. For the rest of the afternoon, the community leaders surrounded my table, celebrating my real dedication to the craft. I unlinked my ring from my finger and left it on Garrett's coordinator desk on my way out. They haven't sent me a single text message since last weekend, and in the quiet, beautiful reality of my own independent success, I finally found my peace.